After that, we have Miss Makija. She's here. The Indra Makija right there. She was a chair for 2 years, and great job. She's still doing every second and fourth Sunday in the words of Swami Vivekananda, a 2-hour program, whether there's anybody there or not, but without fail, she's doing that program. And now our chairperson is Dr. Lata Bakani of the Vivekananda Spiritual Center. And the reason I gave you all this, all these functions do cost money. It takes a lot of efforts from all of us, especially Stishi, I say our treasurer, Mr. Tamburelli, so he writes checks, and Tilaji and all, and we are running negative in Vivekananda Spiritual Center. And today when we had a meeting at the boardroom, and they were giving me this big piece of paper, and we are $8,690 negative. So whatever it means to you, please help us. When you write a check to Hindu Temple, write down in the memo section, Vivekananda Spiritual Center, VSC. So that will go to that account. Having said that, Swami Ishatmananda is very, very particular about the timing, and I'm not gonna disappoint him. Our next speaker is a great individual, and I'm gonna have my co-MC, Raviji, introduce her, but I like to say a few words about her. I know her and her family for the past 40 plus years. She and I had the same guru, Swami Bhashananda. And Swami Bhashananda, when we opened this temple, was here, and he made one statement. He said, it's easy to build these temples, so difficult to take care of them. I said, what is he talking about? And he said, so difficult to build that temple, to raise money. Well, now we'll take care of it. But those words was true words, so difficult to maintain them. Now we realize it after 30 years of that, 40 years. Having said that, I'm going to ask Raviji, please introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Amreshji, for that eloquent introduction. And again, thank you, Swami Sumanasanandaji, for your very eloquent and graphic description of the selfless service provided by Sister Nivedita. And further, I couldn't help recalling that India and Indian civilization attracted so many people over the centuries, whether Genghis Khan from Mongolia or people from Arabic lands or from Europe. People came for spices, people came for the Muslim clothes, people came for treasures. Nobody came to serve the people of India, and that is Sister Nivedita. And inspired by Swami Vivekananda, the great soul of India, the great saint. Again, thank you so much for so nicely putting forward for our consumption. And now I would like to introduce Mrs. Octavia Harriston, a staunch follower of the Mutt and disciple of our Ramakrishna Mutt and then Vedanta Society. She is not only a great disciple, she has been following the mission very closely and serving the mission. Ma'am, kindly enlighten us. Thank you.
Good evening to Swamis and to all of you. I must start by saying what a pleasure it is for me to be here. When Swami Ishatmananda called and told me, look for Amrish, I didn't know exactly who he was talking about, so imagine my surprise when I come in and I see someone that I've known for almost 40 years. That notwithstanding, the welcome that I feel here, had I not seen someone I knew, I must say there's a warmth here, there's a feeling. I've traveled all over India, I've seen many of the temples. It is such a pleasure to be here, and when I see that structure, I'm transported back there. Now, Swami Ishatmananda requested me to speak on the subject, an African American woman's perspective of Sister Nivedita. I said, that's kind of an unusual subject, isn't it? I realized that the universality of Vedanta, needless to say. I don't know if there are many of you here who have known an African American perspective of not only Sister Nivedita, but of Vedanta. When you are giving a perspective, I think it means that you are looking at a person, a subject, through the lenses of your own culture. You're looking through those lenses tinged with your own cultural values, feelings, and so forth. And sometimes that values, and I must add, those biases also come into play. When I look at Sister Nivedita, I was not so much aware of her, although I have been in Vedanta for over 50 years. I was here when the second Swami in charge of the Chicago temple, Swami Vishwananda, came. My husband and I went there. Just a little bit about my background as I tell you that I'll be looking through the lenses of my culture aside from my time in Vedanta. I stand before you an African American woman. I consider myself somewhat a survivor of a brutal system that stole my people from our homeland, brought us here to this country in the holds of ships chained together, where my ancestors, lay in their own filth, making that crossing, and how they were then, I don't like to use the term slave. I was talking to a good friend the other day who said he's writing a book called We Were Never Slaves. I don't know if he's here. He told me he was going to try to make this program because he's been involved in Vedanta a long time also. But I look at us and people say we are the children of slaves. I said we were not slaves. The people who were brought here came from the northeast coast of Africa for the most part. We were not, as we have been depicted, savages in trees with bones in our noses and so forth. If you're aware of the northeast coast of Africa, you have a great institution of learning there, Timbuktu. The people who were brought here came from that tradition, and I'm reminded of Carl Jung, when he first went to Africa, said, when I go, I want to see Egypt. But first, I want to start in sub-Sahara Africa because everything in Egypt merged from sub-Sahara Africa. My ancestors were brought here, brutalized, families torn apart. There has never been an experience that we went through. And mind you, bear with me for a moment. I'm simply giving you a little background so that you can know whose lenses are looking at Sister Nivedita. In order to justify how we were treated, they portrayed us as savages. I must say I visited a museum in Hyderabad, the Nizam of Hyderabad, where all the peoples of the world had their own little exhibition area, and the exhibition that I saw of Africa really, really hurt me, but then I realized you only know the portrayal you've been given. If you get to know a people, then you get to know them. So let me get on to Sister Nivedita, because I could go on and on about my people, but that's another discourse. As I said, I simply want to give you an idea of the cultural lenses through which I'm viewing her, because that portrayal of us never told all of our accomplishments. And I'm just going to give you 3, then I'm going to go on with the subject matter that I was asked to speak on here. Example, those of you sitting in the back, I don't know how well you can hear me, but if it were not for this device, a black man invented this. You were never told that. If you've had open heart surgery, I invite you to Google Dr. William Hale, I think his name. He was with Providence Hospital, the first doctor to do open heart surgery. If you've ever known someone whose life was saved by blood plasma, Dr. West. And if you will Google, you will find those people. But once again, I won't take your time with that. That's a whole nother discourse. On to Sister Nivedita. As I said, I was not so much aware of her other than having heard her name mentioned in the works of the woman who wrote, and it'll come to me, Marie-Louise Burke's book. As a matter of fact, most of what I know about her, all of what I know about her, in fact, came from reading her biographers. I look at her within the framework of Swami Vivekananda, but there's another framework in which I view her as a holistic person, which is what I want to go into now. Now, I understand that when she met Swami there in London and heard his mission, his portrayal of what he wanted for India, she was hooked. I can understand her love for India. The first time I went to India, we were on a bus heading from Delhi up to Hardwar, and I looked at my husband and said, well, maybe the bus will break down and we won't make it back to get our connecting flight back to Chicago, and we can stay here, because I loved it that much. So I can understand her love for it. Now, in Swamiji choosing her, I understand to a certain extent she lobbied for it. Now, understand, everything I know about her is what I've read. And there are 2 strands of thought that stayed with me as I went through researching, and I thank Swami for giving me that opportunity to do that, because in researching her life, there was a wealth of information, a great expansion of my own knowledge. I was once told by a wise old man that anyone who writes a book should give it a subtitle, or How to Think Like I Think. So in reading about her biographers, I'm very careful to sift through when they are portraying actual events and when they are giving their interpretation of those events. The other thread that goes through my talk, my preparation, was the words of Swami Vivekananda. Because I'm looking at her as a holistic, as a person, because I want to take her, if you will, out of the framework of such an exalted personality that I feel her unapproachable, that I would say, oh, I could never be that way. But she was real, and that is what comes through. The other word that comes through is Swami Vivekananda from a Song of the Sannyasin. Whoso wears the form must wear the chains. Too true, but far beyond both name and form is Atman ever free. Those 2, the subtitle bit and the form and the chain, those dominated my thoughts as I went through preparing these words for you. Now, in Swami Vivekananda choosing her, first of all, I can imagine when she was sitting listening to him, knowing what I have read of her personality, the intense intellectual person that she was, feisty, if you will, yes. I can imagine when we read Swami Vivekananda's words now, and we can feel that power just reading his written words after all the years he's been gone. Can you imagine sitting at his feet hearing those words directly, feeling the force of his personality? I can see where his words, given her personality, fell on fertile ground. One of the things that one of his biographers said was, in his choosing her, he looked at her intense intellectual bent, her dedication. One of the things that caused me to wonder and to look into further was, he said, and this was mentioned twice by this biographer, that Swami Vivekananda said, her Celtic background, above all, her Celtic background. So I said, well, wonder why? Because there were other strong-willed, intense intellectual women around him. So what stood out about her? So I looked into this Celtic background. Within the Celtic background was a professional group of people within the culture, the Druids. I don't know if you may have heard of the Druids. They were a very highly advanced people. They had no written history. Instead, their history was passed on orally. They were in training. They'd have someone in training for 20 years to learn to carry on the traditions. At any rate, their culture and all its essence, mostly, were wiped out by the Roman invaders. But she was of that strain. Within that culture, the women were as strong and as powerful, sometimes maybe more so even, than the men. So I'm sure that this is what Swami Vivekananda looked at in choosing her, that she carried that blood line in her of those strong, powerful women. Plus the fact that, from what I understand, she and Swami Vivekananda from time to time would clash personality-wise. I can think really that maybe that was another reason he chose her, because I was thinking of a statement he made once, that he came to speak to an audience, and when he looked out, he saw all these faces. I don't see that in you, mind you. All these people there just waiting to be molded by what he said. What that says is that he liked someone who would challenge anything that he said, and he met his match in her. She was one who was not so easily bent. Now, in his training of her, now once again, I'll tell you this bit about her life. I got from the visits of Swami's second visit to this nation, when he was training her, that he realized she had all these qualities, but he still had to train her for the work that he wanted her to fulfill. And the work that he wanted to fulfill, his mission of preserving, developing the culture of his beloved India, which he saw, and I agree, as I'm sure all of you do, the incubator of spirituality for the world. And he saw a level of degradation there. He wanted all that corrected. He wanted it brought around. He said he wanted a strong woman to train the women. And I wondered again, why just the women? Because I was used to Swami speaking of, we want muscles of iron and steel, and he would, sometimes I got the feeling that he was more referring to the men. But then I realized, no, that ladies, without that Shakti power, can't do anything. It's necessary, which is why he chose someone with her strength, her ability, her dedication, the fact that she was a teacher, so she had that passion of developing minds. This is what he wanted. He wanted to develop, to restore, to preserve that Shakti power. Now, there are many schools for boys in India. I visited many of them. But this was very special to him. And he trained her for this mission. And she was willing to fulfill this mission. Now, I look at her life and I say, what a fantastic, marvelous life. Here was a woman, she gives up all of the privilege of her European heritage. She gives up her food. Many people say when they go to India, the first is the food and the spices. Although I have friends who say, well, you never had a problem with the spices. No. But she gave up everything. A young woman, and from what I understand, she was rather petite, but she was fiery. She had that fire, that passion that Swami Vivekananda saw was necessary to fulfill his mission. So she gets to India. Now, I said she gave up a life of privilege. When she went to India, let's face it, she was still among the privileged classes. The literary figures, the Tagores and Sri Aurobindo, I understand, scientists and all. However, she was as comfortable with them as she was during the plague, walking through the muddy streets, helping to clean the streets, and to hold a dying child in her arms. She fulfilled that promise. She started her school with much resistance. As Swami spoke of how many of the families first did not want their children to come there, that there was resistance, but she was persistent. She hung in. She got it going. And I talked to a friend who was in India about last year who told me she visited the school, how beautiful it is, how wonderful. This is her work. This is the work of Swami. She was doing the work to fulfill his mission. Now, I think of her life when I say it was fantastic, what a wonderful life. Can you imagine? You're on the high seas, you're in a boat with this eclectic mix of literary, artistic figures, and you're having these conversations every day with Swami Vivekananda. You're sitting at his feet. What adventure. Then to go to a strange land where she knew nothing. She did not know what she was going to face there. Even with Swami Vivekananda telling her that she would sometimes meet with some resistance, you don't really know it until you experience it. So I'm sure she had no idea. So I think of the courage that she had to go, to give up everything. And I look at the way that whenever she spoke of India, it was us, our, we. She was so identified with India. The work that she did there was fantastic. Imagine when she's there. Now, she'd been on the high seas with all these fantastic personalities. Then she meets Holy Mother. She meets all of the direct disciples. She was absorbing the culture, the spirituality. She was Swami Vivekananda's vehicle, but she still had her own mind. And I think this is what he appreciated about her. They had clashes, I understand. Reading a couple of the biographers, as I said, one that I read, I think was a little, shall we say, critical of her. Another, totally devoted. As I said, when you read, the title should have a subtitle, or How to Think Like I Think. So then I said, okay, so how do I think? Just give me the facts about these events and let me see how I feel about them as an African American woman viewing her. Now, with the background that I told you about, my background of my family my ancestors coming from Africa, our view of Europeans was, to say the least, one of skepticism, to say the least. Always looking to see, are there signs of prejudice there? Are there signs of paternalism there? And I'll give you one instance where, here, let's look at who wears the form, wears the chain. So I call this a chain event. There was a statement that was attributed to her because she was there doing the fight for freedom, the struggles for freedom of India. She made a statement and I read it, I put it aside. It kind of stuck in my craw, and I talked to a very good friend of mine who's here listening to me now. And I said, what did she mean? She said, in order for India to gain its freedom, I think that some of the more cultured, outstanding Indian people should travel abroad more often in Europe to show that you're worthy of governing yourselves. That word, worthy, to show that you're worthy. You're talking about a culture out of which came Swami Vivekananda, Holy Mother, Shankaracharya, the Upanishads. Are people, are they worthy? Well, my friend kind of put me on track. She says, now don't forget that we'd had kings, that we never really governed ourselves. Now I thought about here once again making a parallel, American culture. The people who settled America had kings. Didn't they develop this great America that we now see. And I'll put aside that it was started on the backs of the free labor of my people, all that notwithstanding. But I think that likewise, India had the stamina, the ability, the intellect, the knowledge. However, I said, well, I'm not going to hold her for that, because I remember that in part of her training, this was Marie Louise Burke writing this, that in Swami's training her, she was inflexible, she was opinionated, and he said she had prejudices so deeply inbred that not even she herself was aware of them. That is part of the human condition, friends. For many years, I did cultural diversity training, dealing with cultures, unmasking many of those feelings that are so deeply inbred in us that we don't realize them. And in that view, I did some work with Dr. Morris Massey, that you may be aware of it. Quickly, I'll give you just a little idea of what he talked about, value programming. That by the time, what he said, his theory, by the time a child is 9 or 10 years old, their culture is set, established by their environment. The authority figures around them, the whole culture, that they are set by the time they're 9 or 10. Morris Massey's words, not mine. That they stay that way unless sometime in life there's a C, he called it, an S-E-E, a significant emotional event that makes them look inside and change that. So tell me, do you think there was any more significant emotional event than sitting at the feet of Swami Vivekananda? I don't think you'll find a more significant emotional event. So he trained her to do the work, his mission, let us regenerate India, let us regenerate and preserve this culture that is the incubator of spirituality for the universe. And she was the one to do it. Now, in the later days, they had other conflicts. I understand from one of the biographers that she had wanted him to give her sannyas, and he refused, and this caused her a little angst. I'm sure that there were many moments that when she experienced much angst in being a foreigner in a foreign land and still dedicated, still persistently pushing ahead to fulfill the mission that she herself felt was her destiny, that Swami Vivekananda also felt, I think, was her destiny. They fought sometimes. One of the biographers, I think this is Marie Louise Burke, tells about the time in Brittany when, this was in the last days, this was Swami Vivekananda's second trip to America, when she, for some reason, and I could not understand this, she considered herself in discipleship to one Patrick Geddes. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Geddes. From what I understand, he was kind of a social reformer, but primarily a city planner, from what I understand. I said, now, I don't understand this, and I'd like to get an understanding. Why would she, after sitting at the feet of Swami Vivekananda, say that she's going to be in discipleship to someone who was not of his spiritual bent? Now, here's my take on that. This was in the days when Swami Vivekananda, I think, was about reaching the last of his mission. I remember that in one of the ashrams in India, I saw the picture, and this goes back, my mind goes back to this. I saw the depiction of Sri Ramakrishna as the baby approaching this saint who was in deep meditation and whispering into his ear, I want you to come down with me. I remember that Swami once sitting at the feet of Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna, I can best say, put him into a trance to find out, are you really that saint? Found out that he was. And that Sri Ramakrishna then said, once Naren finds out who he is, he's going to throw this body. And I think that that was about what was about to happen in Brittany that time. He was tired, his health was bad, he had been almost coerced to go on the second trip to the West, and he was about at the end. He was about to throw this body, to realize who he was. His mission almost accomplished. And I remember that in part of the conflict, if you will, that he had with Nivedita at that time, can you imagine this when he said to her, and I said, how Shakespearean. In the course of their conflict, he said to her, if I have made you, then perish. If the Divine Mother made you, go forth into the world and live. He did not see her again, according to the biographer, for about a year. After he passed, we find that Nivedita the school was going. She had done so much, and she had a very strong political bent. One of the letters that she wrote to Josephine McLeod, she said, I am a political person. I cannot imagine a world without politics. So she had that bent. She was a revolutionary. She was a social reformer. She saw all that was happening in India, and she wanted to be involved helping the people. What was the movement? Swadeshi, I think it was. Am I saying that correctly? Yes. I can see her. I said, now this is my imagination working, I'm sure, when I say, what a fantastic person. I could see her as a spy. She said, because of the color of my skin, I can go unwatched in the community. I know that the police were watching her at one time. They probably felt that she was doing something revolutionary that needed to be stopped. But then she gave her life, and I think that at this time, my opinion here, not the biographer's, I think that at this time, she said, I've fulfilled the mission, the school is up and going, I've identified totally and thoroughly with India. We, us, our India. I could understand that feeling. I had that feeling in India. I'll tell you a cute, funny little aside. One of my friends, I don't know if she's here, Indra Makija, do I see her? Yes. I was working with Indra and Usha in the kitchen, and they were talking, laughing, and I was saying, I couldn't understand what they were saying. I said, what are you saying? They said, well, we were saying, Octavia, that we think that in a past life, you were born high caste Indian, and you were mean to the lower caste, so you came back in this life to see how it feels. I often thought about that. When I went to India, I had an overpowering feeling. You said it, yes. I had an overpowering feeling, I'm home. And I think that Nivedita felt that too, because even after Swami's passing, she stayed there. She still worked. She still sacrificed. She was still dedicated. She was still Indian to the core. Now, I'm going to kind of close this. I said that I wanted to see her not as this figure so exalted that I would not feel comfortable in approaching her, but that she showed that she had some of the same human qualities that I and all of us have, so that I would feel very comfortable approaching her. And I said I would love to have had the chance to sit with her over a cup of tea and listen to her talk, to learn from her experiences, her insights, to be inspired by that spirit of dedication. Now, I've been in Vedanta for over 50 years. I must say I never had that feeling of dedication. The dedication, yes, because I worked with Swami Vaishyananda, my guru, for many years. Did a lot of things that he told me to do that I never thought I'd do. The same as Swami Shatmananda saying, Octavia, go and speak. And here I am. But I would like to have been able to sit with her, to learn from her, because I see her as a holistic, as a person. Because when these elevated souls come on this plane and they enter this coil, this human coil, they take on the chains. I still remember reading Sri Ramakrishna saying, just when I thought I had overcome all lust, I was seized by a feeling of lust. He had the personality to overcome it, though. But you're in this chain, in this form, you wear the chains. And that is what makes them approachable, so that we can approach them We who have those chains, we who are on that same path that they're on, we can learn from them. We can be inspired by them. And this is what I see in the life of Sister Nivedita. A strong woman, a powerful woman who led what I consider a very exciting life. She met challenges and she was up for them, for dealing with all the challenges that she met. What a wonderful life. What a wonderful person. What a gift to India she was. What a gift helping to fulfill Swami's mission. I thank you for this opportunity. I thank Swami for asking me to do this. And I thank you for bearing with me, for listening to me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you once again. You need this?
Thank you so much. Well, take a round of applause. Octavia, that was one of the best speeches I heard from you. Thank you. And now I'm going to request, well, since we're running a little late, we will request Stacy and Dilip and others, Sridhar, to escort Swamiji so that they can be seated here and clean up the stage so that
very thankful to you. I wanted to have this Bhangra. Swami Vivekananda loved this because the manliness, the strong, that through the dances, the power that comes up. So, thank you very much once again, and may the power of Swami Vivekananda touch our heart. Thank you very much.
While this is going on, I just want to thank our EC, and then I want to acknowledge the presence of Subba Reddy. Where are you? He's a current board member. Subba Reddy Kandya, I think just stepped out. I want to thank them all, and Harish Vora is here. Harish, thank you so much, and everybody else. I just want to make sure that next month we have Swami Shatvanandaji is going global. Now, today we had the opportunity to hear Swamiji from South Africa. Next month we're going to have opportunity to hear Swamiji Vimokshanandaji from Singapore. So please do come, July 30th, and we'll try to adhere to the timing as planned. And last item is Bhangra. And after that, I like you all to join us for dinner on behalf of this Vivekananda Spiritual Center of Hindu Temple to join us dinner, yeah, at the Rama Auditorium. And thank you. Dr. Reddy, make sure you join us, please. I want to acknowledge the Bhangra team. They are from Northwestern University, one of the best, topmost universities in the country. And by the way, the 4 students who are performing today, they came all the way from Harriston, 2 young women, young girls and the boys. And give them a good hand for that, please, when they come up here. And I'm told that they were one of number 1 Bhangra team in the country. Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Dinner is ready at Rama Kitchen. So let's go there and have a sumptuous dinner prepared by temple volunteers under the direction of Satya Tambarali and Veena.